Hi, I'm Mitch, and welcome to the Restoration Road as we continue our series on the parables of Jesus. And to help me do that, include my good friends here today. I'm going to start with Chris Mosley, pastor of Grace Christian Church in Kendallville, Indiana. I like to call it the fastest growing church in America. Chris, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
You're fading away to nothing. Do we need to be worried about you?
Oh, no. Not as long as there's a Burger King around, I'll be...
You're in good shape?
Yeah, I'll be all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Larry Lee Lance from Youth for Christ, Mr. Youth for Christ. Thank you for being here, Larry.
You're welcome.
And Shelby Lynn from Star 88.3 and other numbers in other communities, so you can also get it.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here,
You're
Shelby.
welcome. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Today we want to talk about the parable of the lost sheep. And I got my worksheet here in front of me, and it's Matthew 18. It's a short one, verses 12 to 14. But the application is just huge, especially for our walks of life. I want to ask, first of all, have you ever lost something of value?
Usually once every other week, I'm searching desperately for my wallet and searching for my keys, usually when I have 10 minutes to get someplace.
Yeah?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh. And what do you do?
Panic. Generally, that's what I do. I panic and blame everyone for losing it. And, I look as hard as I can to find it.
Larry? Lost something of value? You probably lost a couple big fish.
I lost lots of fish, but funny enough, I had my fishing boat stolen last year.
No.
Yeah, we were on a trip in Traverse City, staying at a resort, and went out the next morning to go fishing, and somebody had cut the lock and hauled my trailer and boat away, and found it 4 days later, and there was nothing left of it. It was totally stripped.
I bet you that was a funny feeling to walk out and it's not there.
Yeah, it's like, okay, where did I park it? Did I really bring it? I mean, you're asking all of those questions, and then you finally come to realize that you see the cut lock on the ground, you go, okay, somebody took my boat.
How about you, Shelby? Have you lost anything of value?
My grandma, I have a lot of jewelry from her, and I left a necklace. I have a habit of doing that. Still to this day, will look through my jewelry box for that necklace and think, oh, I lost that. And just feel awful because it's something she passed down to me.
Mm-hmm. My wife seems to lose something pretty valuable, I'd say every other month. Maybe it's not that often, but it seems that way. And if she loses something, there is an all-out search, and it's got commentary until it's found. And I'm trying to think what it was. The most recent one kind of was making me sick to my stomach that it was lost. And she found it. She's so good at finding things. She is really good at finding things. So if I ever lose something, I try to get her in the thing right away. But I remember once at an auction, when Megan was born, Susan and I tried to have them come to auctions as much as possible. I traveled about every weekend. And we were at an auction in Branson, Missouri, and we were staying at kind of a condominium complex rather than a hotel, and we were walking toward a restaurant in that complex. And I'm holding Megan's hand. She's about 3 or 4, probably 4 years old, and we walk into this restaurant, and I let go of her hand to look at, I think, a sign that was going to tell us, like, either what the specials were, or please wait to be seated, or here's how we roll, kind of a thing. So I was looking at it. I let go of her hand. I turn around, and she is absolutely gone. She's gone, just like that. And I thought, this is impossible, and panic started to set in. And I blew open I looked in the girls' restroom that was there. I yelled.
It's another story.
It's that's another
time.
story.
Charges pending.
I blew open these glass doors, almost like you'd see at an automobile dealership kind of thing, and ran out in the parking lot, and I started memorizing cars and license plate numbers, and and then I just started running up and down the hall. And I was in a panic. I mean, nobody was going to run off with my daughter. And because of some other things that had happened prior to that, I felt like she could have been taken. So I think another girl, a little bit older than she was, somehow puts 2 and 2 together and leads me back to the restroom And that's where she was. And I grabbed her face and I brought it next to mine, and I can still feel like her breath on my cheek. And I said, I love you so much. And I said, don't you ever tell your mother about this. But I got to thinking that's exactly how God feels about us and anyone who's made in his image, I believe, who's far from him. We're going to see today in this parable, the parable of the lost sheep, Matthew 18:12 through 14. What does God do when something of value to him is lost? And it's a parable about a shepherd's lost sheep, and Jesus described God's passion for the lost. So, Shelby, could you read Matthew 18:12? So just the first verse.
Sure. What do you think? If a man owns 100 sheep and one of them wanders away, will he not leave the 99 on the hills and go look for the one that wandered off?
You read that as a mom. I remember the first time I read that, I thought about this. Wait a minute.
No.
What about the other 99?
Yeah, come on.
You know, it sounds like 2,000 years later through our Western eyes that the shepherd abandoned them, and it's a great question. The answer is no. A cultural study tells us that the shepherd would have never left the other 99 unattended. Rather, he would have another shepherd watch the flock while he sought after the sheep. And it's such an understood thing 2,000 years ago. That's why he doesn't address that. 2,000 years ago in Palestine, the people valued sheep for at least 4 reasons. Wool for clothing. Almost all clothing was wool. Tanned skin for leather. Sacrifice for an act of worship. And food for special meals. So consequently, the lost sheep represented tremendous value to the shepherd. I think we kind of think, what's a sheep worth when we read this? But it was tremendous value. So similarly, lost people, those outside Christ, are valuable to God. So valuable that they warrant an all-out search. They were created in the image of the shepherd, capital S, to be in relationship with him. And their sin has caused them to wander away from God's design. And Jesus, our shepherd, came to seek the lost. I am with 3 people who are passionate about this. I'd like you to describe, maybe Chris, if you could go first, where this passion comes from and how it's been lived out in your life.
Probably because I was about as lost as a sheep could get, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. I mean, I've been open about that before. You know, I was involved in drugs and alcohol and all that, and at a very, very early age, in middle school even. I know what it feels like to be out there. And I know how comforting it is when someone takes the time to come and find you. I still remember the people that were instrumental in reaching me, and that kind of pulled me to Christ, if you will. And I don't know, when you've been lost and found, I like the saying, found people find people. You know, and that's kind of how it is. I know how bad it felt to be lost, and now that I'm found, I want to make sure that other people are as well. So that's kind of how it relates to me.
Powerful. When did you decide to be a pastor?
I was about a year after I got saved. I had a desire to go into ministry, and so I started pursuing ministry. I was 23. And I was, a raging drunk up to 22, you know, and into drugs. And I couldn't, I had an insatiable desire for the Word. I had that, that maybe it's naive. When you first get saved, you think everybody you talk to is going to get saved when they hear about how great he is.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And during that honeymoon phase is really a great time to get people addicted to the Word of God.
It is.
And I got addicted to the Word of God.
That's
and
what
then,
happened to me.
That's kind of how, I got pulled into ministry. I just back to the found people, find people.
Yeah, that's the reason I asked, is because you turned on a dime. You literally did a 180 and then said, I'm all in. I'm going to help other people find God. How about you, Larry?
Well, that's a ditto. You know my story. And
Yeah.
Same thing, turned on a dime, and I still don't know how, to this day, God reaches down and flips that switch so quickly and you're going a new direction. But I guess what I thought was, I started thinking back of the influence I had on others that caused them to wander away. So I think of a brother who spent 18 years in prison because I turned him onto drugs. I think of people's lives that they wandered away because of my influence. So I went there. Obviously, I've tried to redeem that through ministry for 38 years to get them back in the fold. But that made me go to that place of the influence we have both ways.
It's powerful.
Pretty powerful.
It really is. Shelby, how about you?
Well, I kind of am your Christian case. I grew up in the church, Christian family, and I think serving is just what you did. I was always there when the church doors were open, battled an eating disorder in college, and so the same thing. I think when you experience God's grace, you can't help but just want to share that and be a part of seeing people be changed. But I'm so thankful. I think it's easy for Christian kids to feel like their life is boring, but I feel like I got a head start on you guys because I had that foundation growing up, and
Well, that's a good way to look at it.
I've just been able to I have Bible verses that I can recall from memory from a young age, and so I'm passionate about children because I know difficult times in our life will come, but if you have that foundation to draw on, hopefully they'll come back to God and use their lives to serve Him.
Absolutely. One of the most powerful tools for me, and maybe you've all done this, but when I was volunteering full-time as a teaching pastor at Blackhawk, we kind of got everybody together that was on staff, and we said, okay, let's start making a list of names. Who's in our life, who's in each person's life that's outside the kingdom of Christ looking in? And let's be intentional about those people. So I'm pretty sure if I ever put a list together that God brought those people in. And it wasn't necessarily because of my actions, but it's interesting how when you're intentional and there's a name and a face, man, that kind of changes everything. It's not so fuzzy anymore, don't you think? So first, we see in the parable that God seeks the lost. Second, we see that God saves the lost. Shelby, if you could read maybe the first part of 13.
Sure. And if he finds it, I tell you the truth, he is happier about that one sheep.
You know, I think about your story, Larry, and maybe you could tell just a little bit of it about the worship evangelism that took place for you and your friends.
Just a little bit?
Well, you can go with it.
Well, yeah, you know, I was a bartender, the drugs, the alcohol, no, alcoholic parents, no experience with the church whatsoever.
And you're out of high school just a little bit,
I'm 21 years old, trying to find my way and living a fast, hard life. And I show up at a softball tournament that an old football coach invites me to, and I didn't know he was a little country preacher at a Brethren church. And play a couple games of softball, end up at a campfire, and 300 people. Some guy plays the guitar and sings a couple songs. I had no clue what he was doing. And then this preacher coach, standing as close to me as you, stands up and does a 10-minute sermon. Pretty much a Billy Graham hellfire, I just never heard anything about it, but the Spirit was moving. I was confused. My heart was beating fast. And then he said, close your eyes, bow your heads, let's pray. And I hear rustling noise, and when I open my eyes, everybody's gone. And I've always said if I'd have known what the rapture was, man, I'd have been a little crazy. But what I found out was this church and several other churches in the community had been praying for this event for a year, that if they could get myself and Jim and Chad, my two buddies, I was selling drugs to kids. I was going to Chicago and Detroit, loading up my trunk, coming back and turning kids on to drugs. And they thought, man, if we get a hold of these guys. So they were instructed to go pray up in their campers and trailers. And he came right over, and it's like it happened yesterday. Finger in the chest. Larry, what you're doing to the kids of this community has to stop, and you need Jesus Christ as your personal Savior, and you need Him today. And within 3 seconds, I said, yes, sir.
You did?
I did. He's my coach.
Yes.
Right. It's yes, sir. But it was also a yes, sir to God going, okay, I'm tired of this. And I never understood until after that there's this void that only gets filled by Jesus. And it filled as soon as I said, yes, sir. And I don't know if I was saying yes, sir to him or yes, sir, God, but it filled. And changed person. And then, I walk up the hill and there's Grace Weaver and lady I don't know. And she says, and she's crying, and she goes, I'm Grace Weaver, my son Steve, you went to school with him. And she goes, this is a blessed day for me. And I'm thinking, I've never experienced any of this. I don't know what's going on. And she hugs me and says, I love you in the name of Jesus. And she goes, when you were in kindergarten, I went to the teacher, asked her for a list of all the names. And I've been praying for you every day for 17 and a half years. And I broke for 2 reasons. No one had ever told me they loved me. And I was 21. I fell to my knees. And so I experienced the fullness of God filling the hole. I experienced all the pain of no love because of a person I don't even know saying it. But imagine a person praying 17 and a half years for... Mitchell, I was prayed into the kingdom.
Yeah.
And so that's where the journey started. And I was a bartender a couple more weeks, but leading people to Jesus in the bar, you lose your job pretty quick.
Yeah.
So that's true. I lasted 2 weeks and I lost that job.
Can you look up Colossians 4, 5, and 6? And I want to pick up a verse ahead of it, I think. Let's go 4, 4, 5, and 6.
Okay, so pray that I may proclaim it clearly as I should. Be wise in the way you act towards outsiders. Make the most of every opportunity. And let your conversations be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone.
I just feel like that's what was going on there. And I heard an evangelist say one time that we should all pray behind people's backs. We ought to just make it a practice to do that. Chris, I'm sure you've seen lots of people surrender their lives to Christ. That's why your church is growing. Does a particular story stand out of someone like Larry, I guess, that you've seen?
Yeah, I had a friend, when I first started preaching, I'd probably only been preaching maybe a year. I had a friend who had turned to drugs pretty heavily, and he was, shooting up, everything. And he came to church one time. And he walks in the door, and he looked rough. And I walked up and I hugged him, which was, I'm sure, really weird for him to see me, you know what I mean? I mean, if he didn't get over the initial shock of seeing me anyway in a church, because I don't know that he knew at that point. So I preached that one message, and during the invitation, he came down and started crying. He hugged me and trusted Christ. And he was super faithful. I mean, reading, asking questions, walking through the church, shaking people's hand and hugging them. It was just amazing to see the transformation. And he was killed in a car accident 3 months later.
Oh, my.
I think it was 3 or 6 months later.
Yeah. Oh, my.
But he had gotten a ride from someone, and he was on his way to church. He died with his Bible on his way to church. So, I mean...
How did that affect you at that time?
It was a myriad of emotions. Because number one, I went to school with him most of my life, and it was a painful loss. But there was a sense of joy that God placed him in the right spot at the right time to hear the right message. And I don't think it wouldn't have mattered who spoke that day. He was ready to receive the message. And when he trusted, it was a sense of joy that I knew, I would see him again. It wasn't a loss, really. And this sense of urgency to keep on in ministry kind of swept over me, because I thought, what if, that day hadn't happened?
Yeah.
That just goes to show you, I mean, had he not been there, those 3 or 6 months later would have been a much different story.
Every encounter is you're going to say a divine appointment?
Yes.
Yeah. Through the ministry of Star, you see people surrender their lives to Christ for the first time, don't you?
Mm-hmm. I mean, we see people at all stages, and we get those phone calls that truly they were ready to take their life, and a song came on, and they just so happened to be in their car, and it was on 88.3, and they will call us and say, I didn't end it because of a song that came on that you played, and we obviously can't take credit for that. And then you hear about the marriages that are failing, or the man having the affair that hears a song and he turns his car around and he leaves that life and he reconciles with his wife. And I always think it's interesting that we can be there for those moments, but then the follow-up too, because we know that it's daily surrendering our lives, and that people need encouragement daily to stay on that path. And so to be there in those critical moments, but then also to be there when people are just needing that daily reminder of God's love and that encouragement to stick with it, to not give up.
God seeks the lost, God saves the lost, and in the parable, the shepherd searched until he found the lost sheep. I think it's really important to just dwell on that for a minute. Finding was equated with saving, and Jesus came to save the lost. He said that in Matthew 18:11, Luke 19:10. So I think each one of us, anybody watching, we need to ask, what about me? Do I allow the Spirit of the shepherd to work through me in saving the lost? And so I would encourage anyone watching that this week we find that lost sheep and release the Spirit of the shepherd in us, and maybe serve that person. Ask that person about his or her story. Listen to his heart and touch our story where it fits. That's 1 Corinthians 9:22. I've kind of created the acronym SALT on how we connect with other people, and that's what I just said. It's serve, ask, listen, touch. Serving initiates a relationship. Asking intrigues a relationship. Listening gives integrity to a relationship. And touching, which I mean connecting my story with theirs, my life with theirs, where there's common ground, gives intimacy to a relationship. So serve, ask, listen, touch. So third, God celebrates the restoration of the lost. Shelby, could you read the rest of 18:13 and all of 14, please?
Okay, so he is happier about that one sheep than about the 99 that did not wander off. And in the same way, your Father in heaven is not willing that any of these little ones should be lost.
The shepherd rejoiced with everyone that his lost sheep was restored to the other 99. And Jesus came to celebrate with all of heaven the restoration of the lost. Luke 15:10, all of heaven is celebrating. Have you ever thought about all of heaven celebrating when you were saved? It happened to you?
Oh, it's overwhelming to think about, you know, not just the coach pastor, not just Grace, not the choir of 300 that I heard singing in the background when they got the word, but it was.
So you actually had the celebration on earth
Wow.
as well.
Grace, who was the one that said, I prayed for, she goes, and God told me when this day happened, there was one thing we had to do. And the people came out, literally, there's a choir of 300. She had a hymnal, and she said, God says we have to sing page 206.
Wow.
So imagine, he lives, he lives. Christ Jesus lives today. I walk with him, I talk with him. We stood on a hillside at 11:30 at night.
3 drug dealers.
3 drug dealers and 300 other people, and I sang all 4 choruses, because Grace says, you sing them all. With her holding my hand, singing that to the Lord. I experienced the angels and heaven's voice. I experienced it all in one night.
Wow.
That convicts me to pray for my daughter's classmates. I think about that story. I need to take that list and do that. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, thank you, Grace.
Yeah.
I need to do the same thing.
Yes.
God prompted me one time, and I tried to make it a practice. I didn't get it always right up until this point, though. Where I would every night when I would before I would go to sleep, I would pray, and I would walk through my office in my mind, and I'd pray for every single employee. And then I found myself starting to walk through my calendar, and I would pray for every auction to a certain point out and pray for those people. And it got me to see things a different way. And I began to see the hand of God in everything that would happen. And I remember we started a kind of a stand-up management team meeting, and we would pray, and it was voluntary. And but when my brother led us in a weekly Bible study too, and I remember watching my cousin, who was so enthusiastic when we'd have an auction, and afterwards I was Sal, he was Guido, and it's a whole other story, but he'd say, "Sal, look what we did," you know? And I'll never forget this. I watched him change after being part of those Bible studies and those stand-up prayer meetings from saying, "Look what we did," to "Look what he did."
Mm-hmm. Amen.
I can't believe that. You probably have celebrations all the time for the lost. You in baptisms.
Oh yeah, we just had one Sunday. It's just amazing. I always tell the people, you know, we celebrate basketball and football games for people who wouldn't walk across the street to give you a glass of water if you were dying of thirst. But we have people who are making a commitment for Christ, first step of discipleship. We should be rejoicing when they come out of the water, you know, and we did. They really, you know, rejoiced for them. When I coach travel softball, and we make it a point every night we're there to do devotions, and every day we invite every team to pray on the mound with us, because you never know when that one person at that one time.
Yeah.
And one team said no at the state tournament, I think it was, or World Series, I can't remember. But one girl on their team came out to the middle of the mound and put her arm around my girls and prayed with them, held their hands. So you just never know when that one person is going to cause celebration.
Yeah. I know you do it too, but because of that experience with my employees, I started to pray for the girls I coached. And what Larry said and what you said, Shelby, I'm now going to expand that list. I'm definitely going to expand that list.
And God honors our prayers, Mitch.
He really does.
You know, I learned a valuable lesson the first day I said yes to Jesus. What a teaching moment that I didn't know about.
Right.
But my dad, I prayed for 21 years, said yes to Jesus on his deathbed with my oldest son there to experience it. My brother got out of prison, said yes to Jesus. You continue to pray, and God does the work. And we all have different gifts and abilities. We can all pray.
Absolutely.
That's something all of us can do, is pray for others.
So that's what we want to do this week. We want to make a list, and we want to seek an audience with the lost sheep in our lives. And we want to serve, ask, listen, touch. We want to pray like crazy, and then guide them. Just be part of God guiding them to their lost heart condition and the story of the shepherd's passionate search for those people. And pray with them. I mean, actually ask them to pray to surrender their lives to Christ and give them that opportunity. And then we can celebrate with the shepherd.
Can you stick a pea in your salt and make it like spalty or something?
I can work on it if you want me to.
Yeah.
Oh, for the prayer
part?
For the prayer part.
Yeah,
We'll work on
make
that.
it spalty.
We'll work on that. Have a great week. Have a great week.
Thank you.